Hi. Today I'll be discussing chapter 23, the Great Depression. So, a couple things that we need to know about the Great Depression. Some factors that caused it was rising inequality, decline of demand, world collapse, and then overextension of investors. So even though the per capita income for regular people was up 10%, for the wealthy it was up 75%. And these things were favored by the wealthy. They had low corporate and personal taxes. They were able to obtain credit very easily. They had a depressed interest rate, and 2.5% of those wealthy had brokerage accounts, which most people, most regular citizens did not. Because of the rise in efficiency in manufacturing, they were able to produce a lot more products. But because a lot of people had already purchased, say, cars during the time where money was good, they had to. There was a surplus of a lot of commodities. So because of the surplus, they would have to cut workers, cut hours, and then of course there would be people that were not employed, which could not fund the economy, and then of course that would call for more cutbacks with the manufacturers, more unemployment as well. The farmers themselves, they were dealing with droughts. They were dealing with domestic and international demand with things like cotton and foodstuffs, soil exhaustion because they were planting so much and not actually taking care of the soil. They were not able to pay on their debts because also another one of these things that was a cause was banks started calling in for their loans. They were tightening up on credit. So without that, a lot of the farmers were defaulting on their loans. Hoover had actually signed the Smoot-Hawley tariff, um, and it was the highest one that had been done. This was in 1930, and other countries in retaliation also mirrored this tax, which made the international trade come to a complete standstill. Um, and our exports fell by 78%. Now, there was a time where, at the beginning of October, like in the middle of October, where investments just disappeared. It caused a complete panic. A lot of wealthy people and bankers and investors got together privately and offered up some money to kind of bail them out. But because of the panic, people started getting rid of stocks. They started dumping money. Banks started calling in on their debts as well. People were not being able to pay. Banks were closing. People were trying to get their money out before the banks closed. So it was a lot of different things going on that was leading to the depression. Now, Hoover only thought that it was kind of a, you have a cycle, you boom, then you bust. And he thought that by 1930, everything should be good to go, but it was not. He also encouraged a lot of charitable agencies to help out people who needed supplies, who needed assistance financially. But because it was so many people that were needing help, they were being exhausted and were having to close down. He was even pleaded to by his advisors and his bankers to do something to help. And he, of course, believed in um, uh, helping businesses, with their government assistance, but that still was not able to stop the depression, even with Americans cutting back on vacations and frivolities, and someone that were not eating, they were skipping meals, they were not paying their electric bill, they weren't paying their credit that they owed to like general stores and places like that. It also saw a reduction in wages that were earned, and people that were chronically unemployed started living together in what they call shanty town, which is like those little small houses, kind of like little one-story, one-room houses, where it was a community of them that lived there. And then we think about African Americans and women. They too were either paid very, very low or they weren't hired because they wanted to give it to someone that was white. So there was a huge thing with just people just not being able to work. We talk about how some of the farmers migrated, the Great Migration to California to beat the droughts, in as much so that they started the states started being concerned about immigration or people coming from other parts taking over their land in California, even with the labor force, with the people from Mexico coming in as well, working for way under. It caused a lot of fear and panic in the people that lived in California, so they started making laws that were discriminatory, that were forcing people to stay in certain places outside of that. They were calling for stricter visa applications, so bringing in immigrants from other countries. That was done as well. And the veterans from the previous wars, including the bonus army, were looking for their payout that they were supposed to get for being in the war. They marched on the Capitol as well to try to get that to no avail. Then we go into FDR and the first New Deal. And in his speech, he talked about things that he wanted to do to help with the bring them up from depression, job programs, pension, public work programs, unemployment insurance, higher wages, farm subsidies, shorter hours, bank regulation, lower tariffs. We know that they established the national holiday, the Emergency Banking Act to try to get the banks back open. He did the fireside chats where he would discuss things weekly. He tried to, garner support for the New Deal. Wanted to let the American people know that he was definitely, serious about combating this problem. We talk about different things. Different programs that assisted government charities, the TVA, the one where they were the projects where they were building hydroelectric dams that would also bring in employment, but also give electricity to certain parts of Tennessee that was struggling to maintain that. Um, then we talk about how either in the South, the workers and the farmers were even less than the people up north. How the sharecroppers, there was a program where the owners were supposed to give the money to the sharecroppers and the tenants who are, freed slaves, but they would fire the sharecroppers and they would keep the money. Um, they had the National Labor Relation Act, the Wagner Act. This was guaranteed rights of the union workers, which was a big thing because they didn't have any federal backing to the unions up until that time. And then we talk about different people that protested the New Deal. We talked about Huey Long. He was from Louisiana and he was for the sharing of the wealth. So the wealthy people would share their assets, their inheritance. It was a large surplus and kind of spread it around so that everyone would not necessarily be rich but not be in poverty. Um, Francis Townsend wanted to do more for the elderly, which gave them like a pension, about $200 a month to kind of help them, and specifically in the state of California. And then Reverend Charles Coughlin wanted more of a state economy where they handled all of that. Just each state would handle that. So we know that the Supreme Court got into a couple of these arguments. The I'm sorry, NRA was considered unconstitutional, and then after that, that was the AAA fell as well too. And then they launched the second New Deal, which was more so about community projects, government projects. We have the WPA, we have the NLRA. We have the Social Security Act, which gave the old age pension, the unemployment insurance, aid to elderly children. Unfortunately, did not include domestic or farm workers, which left out a lot of African Americans and women. And then it talks about also the equal rights and the New Deal, how really wasn't anything in there for black people because FDR did not want to upset the Southern white farmers, the liberals, or the farm workers, period. So he kind of left out anything that had to do with people of color. And then we talked about how at the end they tried to had the court with more judges, Supreme Court that would be in favor of the New Deal. So they had a plan where they would appoint six younger Supreme Court justices. So when the older ones passed away or didn't run, they would already have a set group of people that were for the New Deal. But that did not help. And then, of course, FDR's attention went more toward World War II, which we'll be discussing in chapter 24.